Satan, Lucifer, Belial, Leviathan, Samael.
Welcome. This is Aleister Nacht. I'm glad that you joined me tonight. We're going to have a good time. This is very informal, and this is the first time I have done an event like this. So feel free to ask questions. I'm going to present my presentation, but it does not have to be that rigid. We can talk, you can ask questions, and we can kind of go from there. So welcome everyone. Now I'm kind of finding my way around this new software, so I'm going to try not to mess it up too bad. If I disconnect for whatever reason, then just refresh your browser. I'll come back in. Like I say, this is the first time I've done this, so it's absolutely a fantastic event to try this out on. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to move over to here. And now we're going to share the screen. All right. So, can you see that? Everything all right there? All right. Well, here we go then. So let's go ahead and try this out like this. So the coming collapse. So what is this all about? Is this doomsday or what? Well, yes and no. First of all, let's charge the words. Satanas, I ask for your divine guidance to open the gates of infernal wisdom for the listener. So mote it be. So a lot of people have predicted the economic collapse for 2020. They're predicting up to 78% of the United States depopulation as a result of that. Pretty scary. Financial Times says the world economy is now collapsing, and so it's coming from a lot of different directions, and people are saying, well, is this true? Is it not true? And I guess you're probably asking, Aleister, why do you care about anything like this? Well, as I've said before, for a Satanist, it's about survival and being prepared. But don't think that anyone is going to give you a handout. They may give you a hand up. And so this is about being ready for that. And if it doesn't happen, then great. But if it does, then you'll be prepared. All the experts are saying, Ben Bernanke, he says in 2020, Wile E. Coyote, who is from, the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show, is going to run off the cliff and look down. Alan Greenspan says there are two bubbles, stock market bubble and the bond market bubble. So if you're an investor, you probably know that if you're in stocks and bonds, sometimes you're okay. But if there's a bubble in both stocks and bonds, there's really not much else to invest in. Excuse me, I'm having some green tea again this evening. It's one of my favorite drinks. Scott Minerd of Guggenheim Partners says, the market is on a collision course with disaster, and the catastrophe will hit in late 2019 with stocks losing 40%. So if you're in the market right now and you're invested in the market, think about losing overnight 40% of what you have. Not only your principal, but all of your capital assets. Pretty scary. And then Jim Rogers, who founded the Quantum Fund, really big Wall Street fund, says when we have a bear market, and we are going to have a bear market, it will be the worst in our lifetime. Pretty sobering words. So many experts and columnists like Michael Schneider, he said in October 20th, in an article that he wrote, plan for the worst. Law enforcement authorities all over America are bracing for massive election riots. And we know that this is a very controversial election, and that people's emotions are going to be very, very high during this event. And we know that there will be some kind of upheaval no matter who wins. Also, Michael Schneider wrote on the 15th of October, the economic implosion of 2020, job losses ramp up again as millions of Americans continue to slide into poverty. And as I said during one of my live events, I believe it was the Illuminati live event, one of the things that we're seeing in the United States is the total loss of the middle class. And you're getting more and more of an imbalance between poverty and the super or uber rich and wealthy. Seems like the middle class is just going away, and that's kind of reiterated here in Schneider's article. And then another article on the 14th of October. So we kind of see this winding up to a crescendo. Goodbye, middle class. Half of all American workers made less than $34,000 last year. Incredible. So we can truly see that the middle class is really disappearing. And in our country, in the U.S., our middle class has been the backbone. Ultimately, the middle class pays the most taxes, while the super rich pay very little. And, of course, those that are poor are usually in no capacity to pay taxes at all. So it's a very scary thing that we're seeing right now with the tax base actually drying up. And what you're going to be left with is these oligarchs, these huge uber wealthy people. And to them, it doesn't really matter if the system collapses or not. A lot of them that have invested in the stock market and bond market as well have liquidated. We see some of the big players in there, Warren Buffett and some of these others that have sold out. They say they're totally liquid. They have liquidated all of their holdings because they believe that maybe not in 2020, but in 2021, they seem to see some kind of market correction coming. So it's not just limited to the U.S. either. You know, everyone talks about China and their growing influence, and they're still a communist country. But they have also adopted the Western trading practices and investment practices and things that have made people in the United States as well as all over the world super, super wealthy. Well, China has done that too, and now one of China's experts says that China's collapse is coming within 3 years. And obviously, they are emerging as one of the largest, if not the largest, investment platform countries in the entire world. And obviously, that would be catastrophic for the U.S., and it would be catastrophic for China if the U.S. Collapses. So we see more and more how we're truly tied as a global community where we're no longer isolated by these geopolitical divisions. We actually see that we are actually all in the same neighborhood on this earth. Again, Bloomberg says, and this is their opinion, a crash in the dollar is coming. The world is having serious doubts about the once widely accepted presumption that America was the exception. So again, looking more and more in the past, many investors, especially investors in the U.S., have always relied on the strength of the U.S. dollar. And what we have seen here recently, and actually this began a long time ago, I'll explain that in just a second, but what we're seeing more and more of is the devaluing of the dollar. So back in the 1970s, up until the 1970s, the dollar was based upon gold. It was the gold standard, and $1 would equate to $1 worth of gold. And so the currency had something behind it. It had true value as opposed to just bartering value. And so in the 1970s, the administration under Nixon actually eliminated that, where the dollar is no longer, or was no longer, tied to gold. And this was really bad for two reasons. First of all, it created what they call a fiat currency, which is just a currency that is not based on anything. It's based on what I am willing to give you for something, but that note that I give you, that dollar bill or 20 or 50, really has no value whatsoever in gold. It's not backed up with anything. And so that was one of the big, I guess, shocks to the system for the dollar. The second was, what this did is this freed up the reserve banks, and it gave them the ability to print more money than there was gold. So you're printing more money. That money has less and less of a value. And so what happens is, if you had $100 in your bank account in the 1970s, before the dollar was cut from gold, then it would have meant that you had $100 worth of something real and tangible, gold. After that, it meant that $100 is not backed up with anything, nothing. except the Reserve Bank's promise that you can use that as a note for legal tender. And if you'll pull out any dollar bill or 50 or 100 or whatever from your wallet and read it, it basically says that this note is for legal tender. And so that was the second thing that has kind of started this whole thing in motion. What makes it even worse is that the government continues to print more and more money. So when the government said, well, we're going to have a stimulus package. Well, where do you think they get that money from? They don't have that money in the bank. What they do is they print more notes, which now means that $100 that you had in the 70s that was worth $100 is now only worth about $30 because it has devalued roughly about 70%. Now that's just dollar to dollar. Actually, it's even worse than that if you look at percentages and you look at the particular situation. It's even worse than that. So what we end up with is the more money they print, it's just kind of like a quasi supply and demand, right? If you flood the market with money, then it's worth less. And since you untied it from gold, it's worth even less now. And so we've seen this, like in 1993, for 500 billion dinar in Yugoslavia. In 1993, that would buy 2 liters of milk. So what you get in the inflation market is you end up where it takes a truckload of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Your money means absolutely nothing. You can be a millionaire, but the buying power of your money is not $1 million. So what can we do? What's the point of this, right? Do we just go in a cave and hide, or what do we do? Well, you can consider some things. You can consider relocation. My question is where? Where would you go to? Because if the collapse happens with the dollar, most markets are tied to the dollar, even the European markets, and so it's going to drag those markets down as well. And then, as we saw, if China, if that market goes into collapse around the same time that ours does here in the U.S., then there's really not going to be anywhere on the face of the earth that is not going to be truly affected by this. If you're living on the dollar system, right? If you're living on the monetary system, let's say. You could invest in digital assets. Well, a lot of people have said, well, I'm safe. I'm just going to go and I'm going to buy cryptocurrency, right? I'm going to buy some of this, some Bitcoin, and some of these others. And there are so many of them, I can't even keep up with them now. And so they say, I'll just buy into that. Well, that's a good theory. Quite honestly, though, like with Bitcoin, you should have bought into it a decade ago, because now it's so expensive to get into it. And again, if your dollar is devalued, what are you going to use? So if you have $1 and you want to buy $1 worth of Bitcoin, which is like 0.00000002000, then your $1 is not really going to get 1 for 1. So invest in digital currency? I don't know. What about buying gold and silver, Aleister? You'll be in good shape with that, right? Just buy a bunch of gold and a bunch of silver. Well, once again, I go back to the same analogy. Gold and silver, they're skyrocketing in price. Gold is. Silver is coming closely behind it. So again, if you have $1 and you want to buy $1 worth of gold, you're not going to get $1 worth of gold. You're going to get a lot less than $1 worth of it because the currency is so devalued. What about considering offshore options? You know what? I can go to Jamaica, I can go to South America, I can go to wherever. Again, you're not really going to be safe from this investment-wise, no matter where you live, no matter where you bank. Your offshore accounts, those are banks, correct? So they're going to be heavily influenced by this collapse. And again, it's going to come back to the fact that no one is going to be immune to that. Ultimately, it will come back to key survival. So trying to get supplies for surviving during and after this collapse, a lot of it will be knowledge. Leaving the cities, being able to go out and try to find a way to live, growing your own food. And I know I sound crazy when I say that, and I'm really not one of these folks that's all about prepping. I'm not a big prepper, but I do understand that there are a few things that you do want to take care of yourself. For instance, drinking water. So that's something that, if you have a well as opposed to if you're on a municipal water supply, then you will have water. So these are things that, again, are intertwined, and there's no one size fits all, and there's no right answer. Tonight's presentation is simply so people will think. I value you as my Patreon, as fellow Satanists, as people who are critical and think about these things, and that's why I'm presenting this. Maps, again, you need to know alternative routes and things. You need to be able to navigate your way around. This sounds very simple, but think about if your cell phone were to fail and you did not have GPS for whatever reason. Remember, if the United States government goes bankrupt, there are a lot of satellites up there that are GPS satellites that are maintained by the United States government. Now, there are others as well, but again, these are venture capital companies that are starting up and starting space tourism and things like that. They're probably heavily invested, or their backers are heavily invested in the markets. And again, what's going to happen to them when this crash happens? You will see that they will no longer have the money to maintain those satellites and those things that are up there. You can keep your pet indoors. If you have an animal, many times there are people who obviously want to hurt animals. They want to hurt them for fun, or if people get hungry enough, you may find that your pet now becomes dinner for someone. Very, very shocking. And again, this sounds just like a Rob Zombie movie, but you have to think about it and you have to consider it. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and you will never, ever be disappointed. Don't answer the door. If someone comes to the door after this begins to happen, make sure that you've got all the supplies that you need and that you protect you and yours, no matter what force you have to use to protect what is you and yours. Keep your family together, or keep your loved ones together. If you have children, if you have siblings, if you have parents, keep them together, because together it goes back to our evolution as animals. We are herd animals one way or the other. And sometimes being a herd animal is not bad if the herd can survive together. So if I bring something to the table, maybe a way of being able to do something that contributes to the overall well-being of the herd, then that's a good thing. If I know how to hunt or fish, or if you know how to do something else, maybe garden or grow something, these are all skills that now become very, very in demand. And again, if you can bring it together, you will be a lot safer. Also remember, when money becomes short, you cannot count on the civil services that are out there, like 911, the police department, the fire department. So you have to take precautions, and you have to think about that, right? You wouldn't want to do something reckless that would cause your house to burn down, because there may or may not be anyone to come and help you put that fire out, except for you and your family, or your friends, or your community that you have created together. So don't rely on 911. Be prepared to keep your firearm on you. So if you have weapons, you'll have to carry them. You will have to have plenty of ammunition. You will have to have all these things so that you can deter other people from taking what you have been smart and prepared yourself for. You're not going to let them come and take it away from you, not without a fight. And that's exactly what this is all about. So keep that firearm on you, and know how to use that firearm. I know people that have gone and bought guns at the gun store, and they buy a box of bullets, and they put it in the closet, and they never fire the weapon. Well, what do you think is going to happen when you really need that weapon? You're not going to be proficient, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up hurting someone that you don't intend to hurt with that weapon. So get that weapon, go to the range, go out in the woods, wherever you go, and you do your shooting. And the same thing holds true for bow and arrow, crossbow, knives, machetes, any type of weapon. Some of the martial arts weapons that are out there, fantastic. And if you're proficient in using those, absolutely, you will not have to worry about someone messing with what you have. So when a country's economy begins to collapse, or when it is collapsing, there's always a black market that opens up. I mean, there are huge black markets in these socialist and communist countries, just because people can't get it the normal way. So if you can't go to your store and you can't buy something, you try to get it other ways. And we'll look at some different strategies to do that, and some different ways without using money that you can do that. The black market actually replaces the normal economy. Excuse me. Without it, a lot of people would end up starving because a lot of people use that black market to feed themselves and their families. There's a couple things that you can think about, and there are many economies that can be used during a collapse. You've got the money-based, right? And that's what most of us live on. So you have a job, you do some work, you do whatever it is that you do, and you get paid for that, right? In this market, no one does anything for free. There's no sense of community. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And the mentality is every man for himself. Now, once the money-based economy is gone, you have to go to a couple of other economies because money will mean nothing, right? You may have seen movies like in the end of World War II. The Germans were burning Deutschmarks, money, to keep warm because it was wintertime, and they would have a wheelbarrow full of money, and they were just using it to keep the fire going, right? Because it was worthless. Same thing here with a collapse. You've got the barter economy. So this is like the black market, and people are still relying on money for most of their needs, right? Well, I would say maybe some of their needs. But bartering allows for a little bit of independence, and people can expand their skills beyond their job. Like they can learn to make things and do things that will help them, right? So while they may still have to work, they start growing a garden and they learn to can vegetables and things like that, right? They start neighborhood gardens so that everyone can kind of work together, you know, in case of hard times, right? And it starts initially just for fun, you know, to see who can grow the biggest tomato. But in a situation like we're talking about, it may truly be life or death, the difference between eating and not eating. So the barter economy is very powerful in itself. And then there's gift economies, and these are usually locally based. There's a strong sense of community, again, trying to find other people that are in your community or wherever you end up, and try to work deals with them for what you know how to do and they know how to do. Now you can use a little bit of bartering, and you can also gift them something and they gift you something. So you may grow a garden and you gift them some tomatoes or corn or something from the garden, and they hunt, so they give you meat from what they have killed. So again, it helps build a strong sense of community with whoever your pack is or your herd is. People are relying on each other, and they readily help each other. Back during the stock market crash, the early 1900s, 1920, I guess, or somewhere right around in there, you know, people actually got closer together after that because they may have a large piece of land that was an opulent mansion and gardens, and after this they went out to the people in the community and said, hey, I've got all of this land. We can get seeds and we can turn this land into a farm, And, together we can make it. We can grow enough to help us through the winter. And so it's, again, people relying on each other and working together. Everybody has skills, and everyone needs to try to aim to be as self-sufficient as possible. That's difficult to do in our society, especially in a society where bigger is better, more is wonderful. The more money you have, the better. Everyone tries to live this rich lifestyle and live outside of their means. And I read an interesting article that said that like 82% of families in the United States, now I'm talking about the U.S., 82% were 3 paychecks away from losing their home. So if they lost their job, 3 paychecks later, the bank would foreclose and come and get their home. Now, I'm not talking about the foreclosure protection that the government has put in place right now, and the rent protection. This is something we've never seen. This is just on average. But it still says very much about how in debt people truly are. And they shouldn't be like that. That's very, very dangerous way to be, because you're only one paycheck away from absolute being homeless. Be ready and able to move fast and cover a lot of ground. If if a disaster strikes or what have you, there may be terrorist attacks, there may be natural disasters. I live in Florida, and always in the back of my mind is the thought about hurricanes, right? So there's hurricanes during this time of year. We're almost to the end of hurricane season, not quite, but we're getting there. And then in the summertime, the spring especially, tornadoes, right? All this adverse weather events, riots, looting, total anarchy, right? Total anarchy. So it's important to know where you would go, how many miles it would take you to get there, and expect danger. I am so surprised when they issue an evacuation order because a hurricane is coming, right? They issue an evacuation order and people do not have a full tank of gas. So they're running around town on an eighth of a tank of gas trying to find a gas station, and they run out of gas trying to find gas because everyone's trying to buy gas now. So the demand is way up, the supply is way down, and they end up going to station after station and they find that the pumps are empty. And, it could be prevented. Okay? Log off. Get off of the phone. Get away from everything and think and plan about what's coming in the future. And you'll be glad that you did. And always have another plan. Always have another exit strategy. Always ask, what will I do if blank happens? So even if you do have a plan, have a backup plan for that as well. The first step is the stockpile emergency supplies, right? If you're going to hunker down, or when you get to where you're going and you're hunkering down, make sure that you've got what you need with you, okay? You should be building this slowly, just enough to know that you can make it a certain amount of time with clean water, with food, even if it's snacks or what have you, right? Because all of these things that we have come to depend on, like fast food and convenience stores and restaurants and all of this, they're not going to be open. during this. Grocery stores, the same way. There may be a run on grocery stores, just like there was with the toilet tissue at the beginning of this, coronavirus. And, you will be left with nothing. So begin to stockpile. The second is learn to barter an item, right? Think about what you have and what you can trade for something else. And always think about that. And when you're investing or buying something, think about not only what you're going to use it for, but think about what you could get for it, right? And also think about all the things that are involved in that as well. So think about the fact that if you're buying a new Nintendo, possibility is that's going to be worthless. You're not going to be able to barter with that if there's no electricity. So think about it, make wise choices. Know how to survive in the wild. If you don't get out and experience the outdoors and learn basic shelter, water, food, warmth, those are things that are going to be important, especially if you find that you're not going to be able to be indoors for a while. Maybe you're in transit. Always increase your self-sufficiency. Money is fantastic, okay? But don't live your life with the thought that I just need more and more money. If I have more and more money, I will be okay. It's not like that. If this type situation happens, it won't be like that. Even if a disaster never strikes, there are a lot of benefits of having this, like saving money and restoring your connection with the land as well. Even during our practice of satanic rituals and magic, we still respect certain things of the land, and we consider those things to be charged with energy. And so you will gain much more respect, and you will be respected a lot more by those entities on the other side of the veil. And build a survival community. Again, no one can be 100% self-sufficient. If you know bushcraft and you can hunt or what have you, you may get injured. You may get sick. So you should always look to form some sense of community. And this is something that, people have watched the shows like The Walking Dead and all these zombie apocalypse shows and things like that. And one thing to take away from those is that if you are in a situation where you are having to rely on other people, there will be people that want to take advantage of you. And as Satanists, we think critically, but we can be suckered into something. The important thing is to know what to do when that happens and not let it happen again. So what is your plan